I never thought the day I cleaned a billionaire's mansion would be the day I became his prisoner. It wasn't a dungeon, not with chains and bars, but the kind of cage that wraps around your mind, tightening with every perfectly polished surface, every silent corridor. My name is Clara, and until that Tuesday, my biggest prison had been a mountain of overdue bills and the relentless tick of the clock reminding me how quickly I was running out of time. My world was a tiny two-bedroom apartment in a part of Queens where the rumble of the subway was a constant lullaby, and the smell of jasmine and exhaust fumes mingled in the humid air. I had a beautiful, bright-eyed daughter, Lily, who believed fairies lived in our backyard, which was really just a patchy stretch of crabgrass. Her belief was the only thing that kept me believing in anything beyond the next paycheck. Cleaning houses paid the rent, barely, and kept food on the table, but it was a relentless grind, each scrub a reminder of the life I hadn't managed to build. Then came the call, an agency I'd never heard of, offering an exorbitant sum for a one-off deep clean. The client was anonymous, the location a hushed whisper, the Sterling estate. Arthur Sterling, the reclusive tech mogul, whose name was synonymous with innovation and immense, almost mythical wealth and equally mythical rumors of eccentricity. My old beat-up Honda Civic, affectionately named the Silver Bullet by Lily, because it once got us to Disney World in record time, groaned its way through the manicured hedges of Greenwich, Connecticut. The air grew thinner, the trees taller, the houses more imposing with every mile. The Sterling estate wasn't just a house, it was a sprawling fortress of glass and steel, nestled on a cliff overlooking the Long Island Sound, an architectural marvel that probably cost more than some small nations. As I pulled up the winding driveway, a sense of awe mixed with an unsettling chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just another job, it felt like stepping into another dimension. The gates, wrought iron masterpieces with intricate, almost menacing designs, had slid open silently as I approached, as if sensing my arrival without human intervention. No one was there to greet me. The mansion loomed, a testament to unbridled power and solitude. Its sleek lines and reflective surfaces seemed to absorb the vibrant colors of the autumn morning, leaving only a muted, almost somber glow. The air was unnaturally still, devoid of birdsong or the rustle of leaves that typically accompanied such a grand setting. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum of ambition. I checked the address on the agency email one more time, my thumb smudging the screen of my cracked phone. Yes, this was it. The instructions had been clear. Enter through the main service entrance. Key will be under the mat. A cliché, almost comically so for a place of this magnitude. It immediately struck me as odd. No staff, no security detail to meet me. It felt like a stage set for a very particular kind of play, one I hadn't auditioned for. My stomach knotted with a vague unease, but the thought of Lily's school trip fund, the overdue electricity bill, and the sheer audacity of the paycheck waiting for me pushed aside the growing trepidation. I swallowed hard, adjusted the strap of my oversized cleaning tote on my shoulder, its familiar weight a small comfort against the alien grandeur of my surroundings, and walked towards the heavy, ornate door. The key was exactly where they said it would be, nestled beneath a surprisingly mundane doormat, adorned with a faded image of a golden retriever. The incongruity was startling. I turned the key in the lock, the click echoing with an unnatural resonance in the profound silence. The door swung inward, revealing a cavernous entry hall, all polished marble and soaring ceilings, bathed in a soft, diffused light from unseen sources. It smelled of ozone and something subtly metallic, not dust, but an absence of life, of daily living. "Hello?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the vastness. No answer, just the hollow echo of my own query. The silence pressed in, heavy and absolute, making the hairs on my arms stand up. I felt an invisible gaze on me, a prickling sensation that suggested surveillance. This wasn't a normal house. It was a museum of wealth, devoid of the clutter, the warmth, the imperfections that make a place a home. My agency contact, a gruff woman named Brenda, had simply said, "The owner wants a top to bottom, no corner left untouched. He's particular, very particular, likes things pristine." Brenda hadn't mentioned the eerie silence, the lack of human presence, or the unsettling feeling that I was walking into a finely orchestrated trap. I started with the kitchen, a stainless steel wonderland that looked like it had never seen a home-cooked meal. Every surface gleamed, every appliance sparkled. It was less a kitchen and more a culinary laboratory. My usual routine of scrubbing away baked-on grease and scrubbing sticky countertops felt out of place here. There was no grease, no sticky residue, just the faint sheen of expensive cleaning products that had clearly been used recently. It was as if someone had just cleaned it, right before I arrived. Why hire me then? The question gnawed at me. As I moved through the pantry, meticulously organized with exotic ingredients I couldn't even name, I noticed a tiny, almost invisible camera lens embedded in the ceiling tile, above a display of rare spices. My heart skipped a beat. It was so perfectly camouflaged I almost missed it. My suspicion amplified. This wasn't a clean for cleanliness's sake. It was a test, a performance. For whom? My gaze swept the immaculate room, now seeing cameras everywhere, disguised as smoke detectors, as tiny pinholes in light fixtures, even in the polished chrome of the faucets. A knot tightened in my stomach. This wasn't just a security system, this was a surveillance network, designed not to deter intruders, but to observe every single movement within. I felt a profound chill, a sense of violation. This wasn't a job, it was an audition, a morbid curiosity played out for an unseen audience. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming, a testament to the owner's paranoia, or perhaps something far more sinister. The realization hit me like a splash of ice water. I wasn't here to clean, I was here to be watched. Every move, every gesture, every moment of vulnerability was being recorded, analyzed, catalogued by unseen eyes. The promise of the extravagant paycheck now felt less like a reward and more like bait, luring me into a situation I hadn't fully comprehended. The fear for Lily intensified. My daughter was my everything, and the thought of being compromised, of putting myself in a position that could jeopardize her, sent a jolt of primal terror through me. I swallowed hard, trying to regain my composure, to appear outwardly calm and professional, even as my insides churned with dread. I reminded myself that I had a job to do, and playing along for now was my best strategy. I forced a blank expression onto my face, but internally a frantic scramble for understanding began. The kitchen morphed into a maze of hallways, each leading to grand, empty rooms, a ballroom, a library filled with untouched first editions, a cinema with plush velvet seats that looked like they'd never cradled a human form. Everywhere, the same pristine, unlived-in perfection, and everywhere, the tiny, glinting eyes of hidden cameras. My anxiety intensified with each step. This wasn't just surveillance, it was an obsession. I found myself instinctively avoiding eye contact with the cameras, as if I could pretend they weren't there, even as their presence screamed at me. I was a puppet on a stage, but I didn't know the script, or the director. As I reached what seemed to be the main living area, a voice, calm and deep, resonated from unseen speakers, making me jump. "Welcome, Clara. I trust you found the key without difficulty." It was a man's voice, smooth as aged whiskey, carrying an air of authority that brooked no argument. It was not the gruff Brenda. It was him, Arthur Sterling. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was here, somewhere, watching me. "You must be wondering why you're here, considering the immaculate state of my home," he continued, a hint of amusement in his tone that chilled me to the bone. "Let's just say I have a very particular interest in observation, and you, Clara, are my latest subject. He told me to proceed to the master bedroom suite, a sprawling expanse that felt more like a separate apartment. "There," he said, his voice echoing, "you will find your true task. There is an object I require you to retrieve." He didn't elaborate, just instructed me to clean thoroughly as I went. The ambiguity was unnerving. I ascended a grand staircase, its marble steps cool beneath my worn sneakers. Each step felt heavier than the last, leading me deeper into his game. The master suite was as opulent as the rest of the house, but with a subtle difference. There was a faint scent of old money, dust, and something else, something faintly floral and melancholic. It felt, paradoxically, more lived in than any other room, despite its perfection. The bed, a four-poster with rich, dark wood, was immaculately made, but a slight indentation on one side of the pillow suggested recent use. A single, delicate white rose sat in a crystal vase on the bedside table, its petals just beginning to curl at the edges. It was a stark contrast to the sterile perfection everywhere else, a small, fragile testament to human presence. My eyes darted around, searching for the object, for any clue. I started cleaning, meticulously wiping down surfaces, my senses heightened, trying to discern what he wanted me to find. Beneath a stack of perfectly arranged financial journals, I found it, not an object, but a small leather-bound journal, old and worn, tucked away as if forgotten. Its cover was embossed with the initials A.S. My breath hitched. This was it. This was the trap. This was the first turn, the moral problem. He wanted me to find his diary. My fingers trembled as I picked up the journal. It felt ancient, heavy with unspoken secrets. I knew, instinctively, that this was the bait. He wanted me to read it, to delve into his past, to violate his privacy, and he was watching. I could feel his eyes on me, judging, analyzing. The ethical dilemma was immediate and stark. My job was to clean, not to snoop. But this wasn't just any snoop. This was an instruction, a silent command from the unseen billionaire. To ignore it would be to fail his test, whatever that meant. To open it would be to willingly step into his twisted game. My mind raced, weighing the potential consequences. My daughter Lily, her bright smile, her trusting eyes flashed before me. The thought of failing this bizarre, high-stakes cleaning job, of losing the astronomical payment that could change our lives, was unbearable. What if this was the only way out? What if reading it was the key to understanding this whole charade and finding my escape? The journal felt warm in my hands, as if it held a tiny, insistent pulse of its own. It beckoned me, a siren call to forbidden knowledge. My gaze drifted to a small antique desk in the corner of the room, impeccably clean, a single silver pen resting on a blotter that had clearly never seen a drop of ink. I walked over, my movements stiff and deliberate, acutely aware of the cameras. My reflection in the polished surface of the desk showed a woman caught between fear and a desperate, burgeoning curiosity. The journal was more than just a book. It was a Pandora's box, and I felt the irresistible urge to open it, to peek inside, even if just a little. I glanced around the pristine room, imagining Sterling's gaze, sharp and analytical, following my every move. He wasn't just watching, he was expecting me to open it. It was a test of obedience, of curiosity, perhaps even of integrity. A shiver ran down my spine. My usual cleaning routine, the methodical wiping, dusting, vacuuming, felt like a farce, a thin veil over the true purpose of my presence here. My hands, calloused from years of scrubbing, felt clumsy as I carefully opened the journal. The leather creaked, a small sound in the overwhelming silence of the mansion. The pages inside were filled with elegant, looping cursive. The ink faded with age. The first entry was dated nearly 40 years ago. September 12th, 1983, my 10th birthday. Father gave me a microscope. Mother said it was unladylike for a boy to be so fascinated by science. But Father understood. He always understood. It wasn't Arthur Sterling's handwriting. The initials on the cover, AS, were his, but the content wasn't about him. It was a child's diary, a secret world of a young boy, perhaps his son, or a younger sibling, or even himself under a different guise. The immediate confusion gave way to a deeper sense of unease. Why would he want me to find this? The entries spoke of a lonely childhood, of a brilliant mind isolated by immense wealth and strict parents. The boy, Arthur Jr., as he sometimes referred to himself, detailed his experiments, his observations of the world, his struggles to connect with a distant mother and a demanding, often absent father. He wrote of his fascination with bugs, with the intricacies of nature, with puzzles and codes. It painted a picture of a child who found solace in logic and isolation, not unlike the man who now held me captive in his opulent mansion. One entry, dated April 15th, 1988, stood out. They say I spend too much time alone. Mother worries. Father says I need to engage more, to prepare for my inheritance. But what if I don't want it? What if I just want to understand how things work, how people work? This wasn't just a journal. It was a window into the mind of someone deeply conflicted, someone who perhaps saw the world as a grand, intricate puzzle to be solved. As I turned a page, a faded, crudely drawn picture fell out. It was a sketch of a young boy with wide, curious eyes peering into a microscope, surrounded by fantastical-looking insects. The drawing was signed, A.S. Jr. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This was Sterling's own childhood diary. He was having me read his personal history, his deepest thoughts. The purpose of the trap began to solidify. It was a psychological game, a test of character, designed to probe not just my physical actions, but my emotional and moral responses. He wasn't interested in cleaning. He was interested in me, and what I would do with his secrets. The more I read, the more I felt an unsettling blend of empathy and revulsion. Arthur Jr.'s world was one of material abundance, but emotional poverty. His observations about people were sharp, cynical even for a child, dissecting their motives like specimens under his microscope. He wrote about a particular governess, Miss Eliza, who was kind to him, but whom his father summarily fired after catching them playing hide-and-seek in the library. Father said Eliza was too soft, that she encouraged unnecessary sentimentality. I wish she hadn't left. She was the only one who saw me, truly saw me. The entry ended with a chilling line. Father taught me a valuable lesson today. Emotions are a weakness. They make you vulnerable. They make you lose. That line echoed the very atmosphere of this house. Cold, calculated, devoid of genuine warmth. I began to understand Arthur Sterling, not just as a reclusive billionaire, but as a product of his own austere upbringing, scarred by a childhood where affection was punished and logic was king. This was his origin story, and he was forcing me to bear witness to it. My hand trembled not just from fear, but from the weight of this intimate disclosure. He wanted me to know him, but on his terms, through his carefully curated past. He wanted me to experience the loneliness that shaped him. As I absorbed the details of Sterling's lonely childhood, a new entry caught my eye, dated August 20th, 1995. This was years later, when Arthur Jr. would have been a young man. The handwriting had matured, but the cynical edge remained. Today, Father gave me the keys to the empire. He said, "The world is a chessboard, Arthur. Never forget that. And always remember, the pawns are expendable." He thinks I understand. I do, but not in the way he expects. This was the turning point, the moment the child became the ruthless billionaire. He had clearly absorbed his father's lessons, but perhaps with a dark, personal twist. The journal was not just a record, it was a confession, an explanation. He was showing me his wounds, exposing the roots of his current behavior. But why me? Why now? The heavy silence of the mansion seemed to deepen around me, amplifying the sound of my own ragged breathing. I felt like an archaeologist, digging through the ruins of a collapsed civilization, uncovering painful truths. The initial fear was still present, a cold serpent coiling in my gut, but it was now laced with a strange, unsettling curiosity. I was no longer just Clara, the cleaning lady. I was Clara, the unwilling confidant, privy to the hidden traumas of a powerful, broken man. This was the first narrative block, revealing his past, adding layers to the mystery of his present actions. A low, resonant chime suddenly filled the room, making me jump, the journal almost slipping from my grasp. "Time for your next task, Clara," Sterling's voice announced, smooth as silk, but with an underlying steel that sent shivers down my spine. "Please place the journal exactly where you found it, then proceed to the West Wing, the art gallery." My heart pounded. He knew I had read it. He knew every page I had turned, every thought that had crossed my mind. The chime, the voice, it was all part of his elaborate surveillance, his controlled environment. I carefully placed the journal back under the stack of financial magazines, making sure it was precisely as I had found it. My hands were still shaking slightly. My mind raced, trying to process the implications of what I had just learned. The man who had trapped me in his mansion wasn't just a reclusive eccentric. He was a deeply damaged individual, operating from a place of profound past hurt. Did that excuse his current behavior? I didn't know. The West Wing felt even more distant, more isolated. As I walked, I tried to formulate a plan. I needed to understand his game, to anticipate his moves. Maybe, just maybe, I could use his own psychology against him. This was the moment I believed I could outsmart him, a false sense of control, my false exit. I thought that by understanding his childhood, his motivations, I had gained an advantage. I started looking for patterns, for clues in the architecture, in the art, anything that might give me an edge. I remembered Arthur Jr.'s fascination with puzzles and codes. What if the entire mansion was a giant puzzle? The art gallery was a vast, minimalist space, filled with abstract sculptures and paintings that seemed to challenge the very definition of art. They were beautiful, yet unsettling, much like Sterling himself. "Find the one that speaks to you, Clara," Sterling's voice instructed, his tone almost playful, a terrifying contrast to the stark reality of my situation. "Tell me what it says." This wasn't about cleaning. It was about interpretation, about exposing my inner self. I scanned the room, my eyes darting from one enigmatic piece to another. I needed to choose carefully, to offer an answer that would satisfy him, perhaps even impress him, and lead me to the next step, a step towards freedom. My gaze landed on a large canvas, a swirl of dark blues and greens, with a single vivid streak of crimson cutting through the center. It was violent, yet beautiful, chaotic, yet perfectly balanced. It reminded me of a storm, a hurricane of emotion barely contained. "It speaks of loneliness," I said, my voice steady, surprising myself with my conviction. "Of a powerful force, isolated, yearning to break free, but trapped within its own creation." I felt a sudden flicker of hope. I was playing his game. I was giving him what he wanted, an emotional response, an insight into my interpretation of his world. He remained silent for a long moment, the air thick with anticipation. Then, a soft chuckle, almost imperceptible, resonated through the speakers. "Insightful, Clara, very insightful. You pass this test." A panel in the wall slid open silently, revealing a narrow, unlit corridor. "Proceed, Clara. Your next objective awaits." My heart leaped. This was it, I thought. My false exit was working. By playing his game, by showing him the emotional depth he craved, I was making progress. I was getting closer to understanding the true nature of his trap, and by extension, my escape. I stepped into the dark corridor, the panel sliding shut behind me, plunging me into complete darkness. A faint, almost imperceptible light emanated from further down the passage, guiding me forward. The air grew colder, heavier, filled with a faint metallic tang, like old blood or forgotten machines. The corridor wound downwards, leading me into what felt like the bowels of the estate, a stark contrast to the opulence above. It was a utilitarian space, concrete walls, exposed pipes, and the hum of unseen machinery. This wasn't for display, this was for work, for secrets. I cautiously navigated the uneven floor, my hands brushing against the rough concrete, a stark, tactile difference from the polished marble and silk-lined walls of the main house. The scent of disinfectant was strong here, masking something else, something cloying and sickly sweet. My stomach lurched. This was not part of the game I had anticipated. The hope I had felt just moments before began to curdle into a cold dread. This path felt less like an exit and more like a descent into something far more sinister. I pulled out my phone, its flashlight beam a weak but reassuring circle in the gloom. The battery was already low, a stark reminder of my growing isolation. As I shone the light around, I noticed subtle details, faded chalk marks on the wall like tallies, and deeper in, a series of locked steel doors, each with a small, blurred window. They looked like cells. My breath caught in my throat. Cells. The word reverberated in my mind, an icy terror spreading through my veins. This wasn't a game, it was a prison. The disinfectant smell, I now realized, was trying to cover up something else, something organic and decaying. My imagination, fueled by fear, conjured images of the worst kind of horror. I pressed my face against one of the grimy windows, but it was too dark inside to see anything clearly, just a vague sense of emptiness and an even stronger, disturbing odor. This wasn't the billionaire's personal retreat. It was something far more sinister. The sound of my own frantic breathing filled the silence. I needed to get out. My false sense of security had been shattered. I was still trapped, deeper than ever. I remembered Lily's face, her innocent questions about when I'd be home. I had promised her a new bike for her birthday, a shiny red one. The thought of not being there for her, of being lost in this gilded cage, sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I fumbled for my phone, trying to get a signal, any signal. But it was dead. The screen remained stubbornly black, a cruel mirror reflecting my deepening despair. I was completely cut off, isolated in this labyrinthian nightmare. The sheer audacity of his plan, the meticulous detail with which he had orchestrated this trap, was horrifying. It was a testament to his perverse genius. A micro-trigger of pure panic sparked through me, leaving me momentarily paralyzed. Suddenly a blinding light flared at the end of the corridor, and Sterling's voice, no longer amused but sharp and commanding, echoed, "Clara, turn around, you've gone too far." My heart leaped into my throat. He was still watching, always watching. I slowly turned, my eyes adjusting to the sudden brightness. Standing at the end of the corridor, bathed in the harsh white light, was Arthur Sterling. He wasn't in disguise anymore. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his eyes like chips of ice. He looked exactly as he did in the financial magazines, a picture of cold, unyielding power. Beside him, standing on a pedestal, was an antique gramophone playing a melancholic jazz tune, its crackle filling the space with an unsettling nostalgia. This was a direct confrontation. My blood ran cold. "You are observant, Clara," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the earlier amusement. "More so than most, but you are also predictable. Your compassion, your instinct to help, to understand, it's all so transparent." He gestured towards the locked doors. "Those are irrelevant, a decoy, a test of your assumptions. You assume the worst, don't you? That's the trap." My breath hitched. The truth came crashing down, harsh and unforgiving. Turn 3. The truth comes out, roles invert. I wasn't the victim of a physical trap in a dungeon. I was the subject of a psychological experiment designed to expose my preconceptions, my fears. He was playing with my mind, stripping away my defenses, not to hurt me physically, but to break me emotionally, to understand how I would react to his twisted game. He didn't want me to escape. He wanted me to reveal myself. The true secret was that the trap was never physical, but a carefully constructed illusion of fear, designed to elicit specific behaviors. Sterling took a step closer, his eyes piercing through me. "You read my journal, didn't you, Clara?" It wasn't a question, but a statement of absolute certainty. "You believed you had found my weakness, my sorrow. You thought you could use it, perhaps, to appeal to my humanity." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "How naive. That journal was placed there for you to find, to evoke precisely that response, to make you think you understood me, to make you think you had an advantage." My mind reeled. Every step I had taken, every thought, every emotion I had felt, had been anticipated, orchestrated. I had been dancing to his tune all along, a puppet on invisible strings. The grandiosity of his plan, the sheer manipulative genius, was terrifying. He hadn't just observed me, he had predicted me. He had used my empathy, my very human desire to find meaning and connection, against me. "You were right about the painting, though," he continued, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. "It does speak of loneliness, my loneliness. But not a loneliness that yearns for connection, Clara, a loneliness that accepts, even embraces, its solitude. Because solitude, when embraced, becomes power." He led me back through the dark corridor, past the decoy cells, and into a circular room I hadn't seen before. It was minimalist, dominated by a large, circular table of polished black granite. On it, a single object, a small, ornate, antique box. "Clara," he said, his voice now softer, almost inviting, "your final test. The box contains something precious, something that could solve all your financial woes, ensure Lily's future, and give you the peace of mind you so desperately crave." My eyes were drawn to the box, its dark wood gleaming under the single spotlight, illuminating the table. My heart pounded. This was it, the real dilemma. He wasn't going to simply let me go. There was always a price. "But there's a condition," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "To open this box, you must first write a confession of a lie you've told, a moral compromise you've made, a secret you've kept hidden, something that weighs on your conscience, something you've never admitted to anyone, not even yourself, something that truly defines your desperation." Turn 4. Discovery of personal fault. He wasn't interested in my physical freedom, he was interested in my moral one. He wanted me to expose my deepest vulnerabilities, to confess my own hidden shame, to admit my own flaws, just as he had supposedly exposed his own in the journal. He wanted me to become like him, stripped bare by the cold, hard truth. My mind flashed back to Lily, her future, the crushing weight of my financial struggles. The temptation was immense, a siren song promising an end to all my worries. But the cost was my soul. The shame of admitting my greatest failure, the secret burden I carried, felt heavier than any gold. I looked at the box, then at Sterling, his face impassive, waiting. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was a twisted philosopher, seeking to prove a point about human nature, about the price of desperation. What if it were you? Would you have the courage to do the same? The question echoed in the silent room, a direct challenge from the depths of my own mind. I remembered the one major compromise I'd made in my life, the one time I'd prioritized money over what felt right. It wasn't a crime, but it felt like one in my conscience. Years ago, before Lily, I had taken a desperate temp job, and my boss, a vile man, asked me to fudge some numbers, to overlook a minor discrepancy that would save his firm a substantial sum at the expense of a struggling small business client. I had done it, out of fear, out of need, out of a terrifying glimpse into a future of destitution. The memory burned, a searing brand on my moral compass. That decision, however small in the grand scheme of things, had haunted me, a quiet whisper of guilt in the darkest hours of the night. It was my secret burden, Sterling wanted that secret. He wanted me to confess it, to externalize my shame, to lay bare the very thing that made me feel unworthy. By doing so, I would be mirroring his own journey, succumbing to the cold logic of expediency he himself had learned from his father. It would be an admission that I too had a price, that my integrity could be bought, and that, I realized with a profound clarity, was the true prison. The room grew heavy with the weight of my internal struggle. I could almost hear the rustle of Lily's bedsheets, the soft murmur of her sleepy voice. Everything I did for her. But what kind of mother would I be if I sacrificed my soul for her future? What lesson would that teach her? That money was worth more than truth, more than integrity. The thought sickened me. "No," I whispered, my voice hoarse but gaining strength with each syllable. "I won't do it." Sterling's eyes narrowed, a flash of something unreadable, perhaps surprise, perhaps disappointment crossing his face. "Are you certain, Clara?" he asked, his voice now laced with a subtle challenge. "Think of Lily. Think of the peace this box could bring you, a clean slate, a future free from worry." He knew exactly which buttons to press. He knew my vulnerabilities, my deepest desires, because he had spent hours, perhaps days, studying me. "Have you also lost someone due to pride?" The question came, unbidden, from within me, directed at him and also at myself. It was a moment of profound realization. My pride here wasn't about ego, it was about retaining the last shreds of my moral dignity. The price of that box wasn't just a confession, it was the surrender of my very self. It was the ultimate test of my resolve, a cruel mirroring of his own father's lessons about the expendability of pawns. I couldn't be his pawn, not anymore. My resolve hardened, a cold steel replacing the knot of fear in my stomach. I met his gaze, unflinching. "My daughter deserves a mother who can look her in the eye and tell her to always do what's right, no matter the cost," I stated, my voice ringing with a conviction I hadn't known I possessed. "She deserves to know that some things are more precious than any amount of money, and my conscience is one of them." Sterling studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The gramophone continued its mournful tune, a lonely dirge in the sterile room. I saw a flicker in his eyes, a momentary wavering, a ghost of something akin to recognition, or perhaps even a hint of something he had long suppressed, genuine emotion. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of decades of solitude, he reached out and gently closed the lid of the ornate box. He didn't open it, he didn't demand my confession. He simply closed it, sealing whatever treasure or test lay within. "You're free to go, Clara," he said, his voice quiet, devoid of its earlier edge, almost weary. "The car will be waiting to take you home." My heart lurched. Just like that? After everything? No grand pronouncements, no dramatic revelations, just a simple dismissal. It was an anticlimax, yet utterly profound. Turn 5. Ambiguous conclusion. Justice wasn't delivered in a courtroom, nor was forgiveness granted with a hug. It was a silent, internal reckoning. I stared at him, unable to move, unable to comprehend the sudden shift. He had created this elaborate trap, this psychological torture, only to let me walk away when I refused to break. Was this his ultimate test? To see if there was anyone left in the world who wouldn't compromise their soul for wealth? He merely nodded towards a door I hadn't noticed before, a simple, unassuming door that looked like any other in a regular home. It was the exit. As I walked towards it, my legs feeling strangely heavy and light at the same time, I glanced back at Sterling. He was standing by the black granite table, looking at the closed box, his back to me, an impossibly lonely figure in the vast, silent room. The gramophone played on, its tune a lament for lost things. I stepped through the door, and the cool evening air hit my face, a welcome shock after the sterile atmosphere of the mansion. A sleek black limousine was waiting, just as he said. The driver, a somber man in a dark suit, held the door open for me. I got in, my mind a jumble of emotions, relief, confusion, a lingering sense of violation, and a strange, unexpected pang of pity for the isolated billionaire. The car pulled away, silently gliding down the winding driveway, past the towering hedges and the grand, imposing gates that had once felt so menacing. As they slowly swung shut behind me, sealing Sterling within his fortress of wealth and loneliness, I knew I was leaving a part of myself there. I had walked into a trap, survived a psychological battle, and emerged not with a fortune, but with my integrity intact. The price had been high, the ordeal terrifying, but I hadn't buckled. My heart was bruised, but my spirit unexpectedly felt stronger, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that no amount of money could ever buy that. The mansion's gates closed behind me, but the echoes of his game lingered, reminding me that some prisons are built not with walls, but with choices. Comment below. What would you have done?